I'm Slava, and today we will tell you about a 7 Series owned by our client in the G12 body. We are currently at our largest BMW service center in Kiev. We found a rare car for our roads, especially compared to the 3 Series and 5 Series, and now we will tell you about it. I think it will be interesting. Considering that our channel is about BMW, I think we'll start with the engine. Here, we have a 3-liter gasoline engine with a single turbocharger marked as B58. For the 7 Series, this is, let us say, the most basic gasoline engine option, the weakest one. If we compare it to, for example, the 3 Series, such as the F30 or the G20, this would be considered a top-tier engine. However, even in this body style, the engine is quite dynamic, producing 326 horsepower in this configuration, with an acceleration time claimed by the manufacturer of 5.6 seconds to 100 kilometers per hour. We can perform a Stage 1 tune on this car using Boot Mod 3, of which we are official dealers. The result should be around 400 horsepower, and we will see how that affects the performance. Regarding the B58 engine, there is not yet extensive experience with these engines, but from what we have seen with mileage of about 150,000 kilometers, there are virtually no significant issues. This engine has had minor problems with coolant leaks, specifically from the thermostat housing, which we actually fixed just a couple of days ago. This car has about 100,000 kilometers on the odometer, and no other issues have arisen so far. I can even share my personal experience with this car, as I had the chance to drive it over 700 kilometers across Ukraine. Let me tell you about the fuel consumption. It is quite interesting. The car is sufficiently dynamic, and the owner gets around 13 to 14 liters per 100 kilometers in city driving without any restrictions, which is a decent result for such a large vehicle in the long wheelbase body style. Now let us talk a bit about the engines that could be installed in this body style. In rare cases, there are rumors about a 2-liter diesel engine being used, but finding such a car is nearly impossible. There were also 3 modifications of the 3-liter diesel engine, single, twin, and quad turbo variants. BMW's 3-liter diesel engines are among the best, so I would certainly choose this car with that engine. However, even the most basic diesel option would cost $5,000 to $7,000 more than this gasoline version. Additionally, there were gasoline V8 and even V12 engines available for this model. If you have a car with a V12 engine, we would be happy to review it. It would be interesting to drive it. However, since V12 models are hard to find, we will focus on this 740 with the B58 engine. This engine provides plenty of power, and with a Stage 1 tune, it should exceed expectations. What we have here is BMW's flagship, the 7 Series, with the base 3-liter gasoline engine for this body style. On the market, such a car costs around $35,000 to $40,000. For this price, you get a relatively modest configuration for a 7 Series. As a reminder, there are versions with V8 4.4-liter engines and V12 engines, which often come with more luxurious trims. However, for the same price, you will find 5 Series models with this engine, and in any case, you are getting more car for the money with the long wheelbase body style. And a more prestigious vehicle, which matters to some people. This car is an American import, as we like to say, a salvage title. It had damage to the front, and in the case of this specific car, I would probably prefer front-end damage, as is the case here, rather than damage to the side or rear. This is because this model employs some quite interesting technologies, including the use of carbon fiber, and it is unclear how such repairs would be handled here, how problematic it might be, and what potential consequences could arise. Let us start the review of the rear seat. Look at this enormous door. I will immediately mention that I am 1 meter 95 centimeters tall. I sit in the back. There is plenty of space here. This is definitely a 7 Series with the comfort and dimensions of a 7 Series. With my size, there is still room for my legs. There's more than enough space. I think that if we were to go on a long trip, it would be very comfortable. The only thing is, since the trim is quite basic, there isn't much to talk about. No monitors, armrests, or any extra buttons. The only feature is the 4-zone climate control. A panoramic roof. Well, if you're a woman, I think you can also freshen up in the mirror. Well, That's all there is to it. And since there's nothing particularly interesting in the back, I think we'll move to the front seat, specifically to the driver's seat, considering this is a BMW. Look, by the way, there are even soft closed doors and keyless entry on all 4 doors. As the owner of an F31 with a 320 diesel, I can say that the car is very comfortable, but I don't really like it. It tends to sway over bumps. Yes, when there are large uneven surfaces, you barely feel them, but if there are smaller bumps, it continues to sway afterwards, and I don't like that. I prefer a car to be more stable, where basically you go over a bump, the suspension handles it, and you immediately settle and continue driving. But that's not the case here. However, considering that, as I mentioned, carbon is used here, the car is 150 kilograms lighter than the previous model, and its weight is not noticeable. It doesn't feel very heavy, as it comes with adaptive dampers and air suspension. The car can be comfortable for the driver as well. I had to drive it on winding roads in the Carpathians, and I didn't hold back at all. The car didn't feel heavy at all. It's quite agile in turns, and you can drive it actively. The owner notices this, and I felt it too. There are modes where you can set it to sport, and it will be dynamic, active, and firm. Or you can set it to comfort, and it will be smooth and effortless, floating over all the bumps. Well, I guess I'm not that old yet, so I prefer when the car is more dynamic and firmer. I would say that my first impression was that I didn't like the car, especially compared to my F31. I prefer the suspension performance on my F31. After driving it for a while, I realized that this car allows you to drive dynamically as well. If you want to actively take some turns, it lets you do that. The engine is sufficient in any situation, and the fuel consumption is reasonable for such a large, heavy car with this level of performance. However, when you want comfort, you can drive calmly and smoothly, choosing the Comfort or Eco Pro mode. In this way, you can even save a bit and still enjoy the ride, cruising in comfort. As for the trim, the standard sound system, Harman Kardon, and it sounds pretty good. For me, it's enough. I've had basic sound systems in almost all my cars, and this one seems just excellent. There are features that I think every reviewer has probably already mentioned, like gesture control for the multimedia system. You can adjust the volume with gestures and change stations as well. All of that works and is quite convenient. There's also an LED instrument panel, which adds a sense of freshness to the car, even though it's already about 5 years old. It doesn't have a head-up display, which would have been nice. In general, for a 7 Series, it's quite a convenient option. Overall, everything you need is here. There are plenty of features, but not excessive ones, so to speak. I'm not sure if this will be relevant for those considering a 7 Series in this body style, but I'll tell you about the fuel consumption from my own experience. While I was driving, trying to make it before curfew, I was quite active on the winding roads, going around 130 to 140 kilometers per hour, speeding up and overtaking here and there. My fuel consumption ended up being 9 liters. When I was already driving from a distance of about 600 kilometers to Kiev, the fuel tank was a little more than half full, and I was driving in a fairly economical mode, rarely exceeding 120 kilometers per hour. Yes, there were some overtakes in certain places, plus the climate control was on, and I was almost always using cruise control. My average fuel consumption ended up being 7 liters. If you really try hard, I think it's possible to get it down to 6, but that would be a bit of a torture for both yourself and the car, and I don't think people buy these cars for that. According to the owner, in the traffic jams of Kiev with active driving, his fuel consumption is around 13 to 14 liters. What I think is quite good, a perfectly good indicator for a 7 Series, such a huge car, with this engine and this performance. In our country, many people love comfort, and for some reason prefer cars like the Toyota Land Cruiser and similar large SUVs, even though they are rarely used for their intended purpose. It is difficult to even call them off-road vehicles because no one really uses them off-road. For off-roading, people tend to choose other types of cars. And in terms of comfort, I believe they do not compare to a car like this, although the prices are similar. Since we are BMW fans, I think the choice is obvious. Choose the 7 Series rather than the Land Cruiser. And what do we have in the end for this money? In my opinion, we have a cool car with excellent dynamics, a good set of features, a lot of car, and great comfort. It seems like a great alternative to the 5 Series in the G30 body with the same engine. Let us know in the comments which one you would choose, the 7 Series or the 5 Series in the G30 body with the same engine. As always, we compare BMW models because we believe that Audi and Mercedes aren't competitors to this brand. So choose BMW and contact us for service, and now let's get back to work.